Many of the forces at play internationally are mirrored in our urban environments. We see the gaps in energy, carbon equity, water, food, leadership, legitimacy played out in our cities, especially in the urban gap between rich and poor, but also in new kinds of gaps in urban infrastructures and ultimately a gap in resilience. One way we see this gap now and see it grow in the next decade is in the spread of the so-called shadow cities, the expanses of informal and often illegal dwellings and infrastructure on the edges of major urban centers. Shadow cities is a nice romantic name. The less romantic name is slums. Many of these shadow cities will swell as a result of continued migration from rural areas, but a growing number will likely result from climate disruption. As we begin to see more flooding, more droughts, more climate-related disasters. We'll also see a growing poverty in the suburbs of the post-industrial world that are traditionally middle class. In fact, what we're likely to start to see is that the edges of our cities represent a continuum from suburbs to slums, with a spectrum of peripheral communities that fall somewhere between the two. And a key challenge to those peripheral communities will be the construction and maintenance of infrastructure. One response to that challenge may be the emergence of what we call social X infrastructures. Now, this is kind of a term of art that we've been using at the Institute to encompass a wide range of participatory systems that build on social technology. Social media, social health, social finance technologies, even social production technologies. Social X infrastructures are not substitutes for traditional hard infrastructures, but they're new ways of organizing urban production. These are not isolated cases. In many cities, urban and peri-urban agriculture satisfies a substantial part of the demand for fresh vegetables, fresh milk, poultry, eggs, even pork, fruit, and freshwater fish. Some cities produce over 50% of these basic foodstuffs for themselves. Now, this is also a rich medium for flourishing subcultures, from urban chicken enthusiasts to yard sharing and youth-led crop mobs. But what is perhaps changing the urban food movement more than anything is the emergence of participatory infrastructures that support cooperation within communities and between marginal communities and urban authorities. In other words, social X infrastructures. In some ways, social X infrastructures are simply an extension of what cities have always been. That is, an extension of our brains and our collective minds. Cities are, in effect, nerve centers of civilization, generating and directing the flows that define our societies and ourselves. Cities are an enormous concentration of cognitive resources, from knowledge to energy to our shared histories. Cities are mental scaffolds, extending our capacities to sense the world and guiding our attention. They are external storage devices for our minds and are persistent conduits exerting influence over our patterns of thought, our habits, and therefore our identities. Identity, and especially gender identity, is a negotiation among biological, cultural, experiential, and environmental factors. Part of our environmental reality today is the toxification of our bodies and the disruption of our hormonal systems. Our bodies are becoming more and more toxic. Pharmaceuticals, detergents, fertilizers, plastics in our water, soil, and food all impact the molecular identities of most living things, and these include impacts on gender. A recent U.S. Geological Survey report indicated that in some American rivers, up to 73% of smallmouth bass, a very popular fishing fish, recreational fish, have both male and female reproductive organs. The percentages were highest nearer human population centers. It's clear that human activities are impacting the hormonal balance of animals and ultimately of ourselves. Bisphenol A, or BPA, is a common ingredient in things such as baby bottles and can linings. BPA has been linked to estrogenic effects disrupting male sexuality, increasing cancer risks, and other negative health factors. A study of male plastic factory workers in China showed that they were more than 7 times more likely than unexposed men to have significant sexual problems. And from the factories to our bodies, in an estimated 93% of the US population shows measurable levels of BPA in their body. Gender is already a psychologically and culturally fluid category, and now we must look to the chemicals in our environment as a factor in the evolving gender story. Emerging neurosciences are increasingly shaping our identities as well. Over the next decade, we can expect to see neuroscience integrated into the social media that connect us. We may find that our social networks, the next generation Facebook and Twitter, actually work directly and visibly on individual nervous systems and vice versa. Some of these connections will be intentionally designed to change our experiences of ourselves, to make us happier, to help us learn faster, or act smarter in the face of big challenges of the coming decade. Some will be designed to target collective behaviors that we want to change but don't quite know how to manage, such as the choices that lead to obesity, to global warming, or to violence. This is a world of influence and persuasion that reimagines our organizations and our institutions, even as it reshapes our identities. But the bottom line is that over the next decade, we'll gain new literacies for reading and writing this neurosocial behavior. We'll develop new strategies for managing our own expectations of daily lives, depression, motivation, fatigue, clarity, by managing our social networks. We're tethering our nervous systems to cyber systems in much more intentional ways. In short, we are beginning to intentionally evolve our neurosocial selves. Now, what does this all mean? When you think about sustainability, when you think about the next 10 years, think about this interwoven collection of carbon and water and identities and cities and power. What you begin to see is the emergence of a future that is quite clearly very challenging. The emergence of a future that quite clearly poses some very real, very strong dilemmas. Dilemmas being choices where none of the options are good, but you have to choose one of them. And yet, it's the kind of future that is offering up a variety of new tools, new capacities, new ideas that will actually enable us to meet these challenges, to resolve these dilemmas, potentially in ways that can lead to a future that we want. It's very easy to listen to a forecast like this one, very easy to listen to this kind of 10-year projection of drought and carbon taxes and conflict between cities and conflict over climate and neuro-identities fiddling with our brains. It's very easy to listen to that and get depressed. It's very easy to listen to this and think, we're doomed. We're not doomed. In part because of the various kinds of technologies and the kinds of ideas and models and ultimately the kinds of behaviors that have emerged to deal with these kinds of issues. But also because we're sitting here listening to this. Thinking about the future is actually one of the best ways you have for dealing with these kinds of deep, scary uncertainties. Thinking about the parameters of change, understanding why tomorrow happens, inevitably puts you in a better position, gives you greater power to control your own fate. The future just doesn't happen. Future just doesn't happen to us. The future is not something that we go to. The future is something that we create with every choice we make, with every decision and idea, desire and fear. And it's up to us to build the future that we want and not to build the future that somebody else wants for us. Thank you.